I am joined by Robert Griffin III, James Whitefield, Yates Meanekeims.
All right, so first play we're going to look at, 2nd and 2, one of the Patriots' first offensive plays.
What's going on, everyone? Mike Kadlick here. Taylor Kyle's there, back with another episode of the Patriots Daily Podcast, powered by Prize Picks. And we're 10 minutes late, and it's my fault, guys. Sorry, I lost track of time. I was too honed in on actually trying to figure out this draft class. We're going to start with the first round today. We're really getting into our studies of these guys, and we're bringing you guys along for the ride. This week, as we mentioned yesterday, we're going to go through rounds 1, 2, and 3 over the next couple days and figure out who fits for the Patriots. So we're going to talk about the obvious ones off the top: Abdul Carter, Travis Hunter, and then me and Taylor are going to give 5 guys who we compiled together. We're going to go back and forth, talk about each one, discuss their fit, their role, potentially on the Patriots if they could get them in round 1. But first and foremost, quick NFL news and sort of update where things sort of stand in the NFL calendar. And this is an Adam Schefter tweet that was posted this morning, and it is franchise tag time. Starting today through next Tuesday, March 4th, NFL teams can designate franchise or transition players. And he also adds expected to be quiet, with tag options including T. Higgins, which we talked about yesterday, Sam Darnold, or Byron Murphy for the Minnesota Vikings, as well as Chiefs guard Trey Smith, who myself and Taylor have talked about extensively on this show. Taylor was on that really mid-season. It was Trey Smith, it was Milton Williams, it was Josh Sweat right off the bat for free agent options. So sounds like Kansas City could potentially go that route. So I know we talked about T yesterday, Taylor, but your thoughts on Trey Smith being included in this discussion? And I know the Patriots, again, don't really have anyone that they could tag or transition tag. Kyle Duggar was transition tagged last year, but nobody this year. But your thoughts on this group of guys and how it could potentially impact the Patriots' plans moving forward?
Yeah, so T. Higgins, we pretty much saw coming. Not necessarily the franchise tag, although it did make the most sense because the amount of money he's going to make is probably going to exceed $30 million. So the tag is less than that. So it just makes sense. Even though usually the tag 2 years in a row is very rarely used because it doubles. Again, in this situation, you can see why the Bengals would, or maybe not doubles, but I know it increases when you use it twice. So for T, expected, I kept him in like the recesses of my brain as an option for the Patriots because I didn't see it happening, didn't want to get my hopes up. And what we thought came to fruition, that the Bengals are going to make a push to retain him. One, after Higgins changed his representation earlier or later in the season, technically. And then Joe Burrow has been very vocal about wanting to keep their core pieces, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Trey Hendrickson, who are the only really key pieces on the entire team. It doesn't make sense why the Bengals haven't already paid Jamar Chase, Trey Hendrickson, and T. Higgins, considering there's no one else they really need to. They're notoriously cheap, but right. Joe Burrow is like, no. If you want to go to Super Bowls, if you want, a franchise quarterback, then you're going to do what I tell you to do. Exercising his, Peyton Manning power. Good for him. So I've wanted Darius Slayton. Chris Godwin now becomes the premier receiver in free agency, and I wouldn't be mad at the Patriots taking a shot at him if they want maybe a guy who can mentor Jalen Polk as that Z slot type of receiver, can also help out Demario Douglas. Add Darius Slayton as that X receiver, so you have an outside guy who has experience in the role and gives you some verticality and some juice after the catch. Now, Trey Smith is the more interesting one. It seemed like the Chiefs, because they are paying people, not quite as many as other teams or especially Super Bowl teams, but they have some contracts going out there. So I thought that Trey Smith might be someone who hit the market. But I believe that Adam Schefter, after it was pointed out by Josh Norris, that the franchise tag for a guard is the same for a tackle. It's just offensive line.
Offensive line, yeah.
Really, you're making the average of the highest paid offensive tackles because they're making the most money. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense for a guard on a franchise tag, but on the transition tag, the Chiefs can say, hey, if you want him, you have to give us a pick for him. That is not an option I think Patriots have. You can get guards in this draft, so I think if they transition tag him, it's very unlikely that anybody's going to give up a pick and then go on and pay him about $20 million. So the Patriots' backup plan, I think Patrick McCarry, we've been saying it makes a whole lot of sense now because he can play left guard, he can play right guard, he can play either of the offensive tackle spots. The guy's a great Swiss Army knife. Very short hands, but he's been on the Ravens. He was a good enough player for them in their run-heavy scheme as well, so he should be good enough for the Patriots, at least as a placeholder. So you say, hey, if you kind of hedge your bet with Caden Wallace and Layden Robinson. Andre Weingarten, friend of the show, recently looked at all of the reports, made his own reports after watching all the Patriots linemen, and he does think that Layden Robinson could be a quality left guard as soon as this season. He thinks Caden Wallace could be a good right tackle this season, at least starting caliber, even if he's not great. So I wanted Trey Smith because my philosophy was if you can get blue chip players, you get them. I don't really care what position. The Patriots didn't have a guaranteed starter at left guard, so I was thinking maybe if he wants to go back to his college position, although that also made the projection a bit murky. But now you're saying, hey, the Patriots are either going to go with the guards they have, whether it's Layden, Cole Strange, even Caden Wallace. Maybe they sign, if not Patrick McCarry, an older guy like a James Daniels maybe. He had a really good last season with the Steelers before getting hurt. He's kind of up there in age as well, so it could just be a placeholder. But I would think that they're either going to go internal or they may draft someone in the mid-rounds. There's pretty good guard depth in this draft, especially for their kind of scheme. So I could see them going that route as well.
Yeah, I think so too. Again, the T. Higgins one kind of deflated things a little because I was not necessarily warming up to it because I was never off T. Higgins. I know the injury and the soft tissue is obviously a concern, and I know we keep bringing that up, but it's just a fact of how Mike Vrabel views these types of players. But look, if they weren't going to tag him, I was all in. Give him the money, show him the money. They need a receiver. You tweeted about it. I know Evan tweeted about it yesterday. You're not going to get these guys in free agency. It's just not going to happen. Like, it's through trade. It's through the draft. That's how you get number one talented wide receiver. So Higgins was a far cry anyway. The Trey Smith part is interesting. I wonder if they do end up doing it. But in general, it's interesting that he was at least thrown into that mix. And so you wonder if, Kansas City actually ends up pulling that trigger. And if they do, if they do need a pick for it, I like how you kind of brought in, they already have guards. Like, they have so many guards. There's kind of a logjam there. Now, none of them necessarily have proven to be starting caliber guys every single day. Cole Strange is a little bit different with the injury history and things of that nature, but it just doesn't seem worth it to have to, send a pick and then pay the guy. It's a lot for a position that you have guys where you hope that there's at least some, some developmental prospect or developmental, I guess, like options looking into the future for sure. Mm-hmm. So that's the franchise tag. We'll see who gets tagged. It is from now through Tuesday, March 4th, that players can be tagged. All right, Taylor, let's get into the fun stuff for today's show. And we're looking at round one fits for the Patriots. They pick at pick 4. They also have the 38th pick, I believe, in the second round. 38th pick. So we both
because they can trade with the Raiders for the 37th pick. That's where I got confused.
Okay, there we go. So they have 4, they have 38, which means they obviously have the option for, the top end guys, but they also have the ability to use that 38th pick, use some other capital, and trade into the back end of the first round. So there's a lot of moving parts that can happen, but we're going to start obviously at pick 4. And the premise of this show and the idea here is to look, again, I know you mentioned yesterday, but based on highlights, scouting reports, and I guess word of mouth, figure out who could fit for the Patriots and why we like these guys. And we're going to do it for the first 3 rounds. We thought of the 5 options for each. Then we thought about the first round even further and realized that Abdul Carter, Travis Hunter are both going to be on our list. So we're going to do those guys, and then we're going to do the 5 guys each. But long story short here, to start it off, Taylor, let's talk about those 2 guys, Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter. And we're going to do a little bit of a would you rather here because we know what these guys are. I know we can give the scouting reports. I guess I'll talk Travis Hunter. You talk Abdul Carter a little bit and just kind of what these guys can bring. We know who Travis Hunter is. He was a 5-star recruit coming out of high school. He was the Heisman Trophy winner. He won the Walter Camp Award. He was AP College Football Player of the Year. He won the Biletnikoff, which is the best wide receiver in football. And then he won the Chuck Bednar, the Lott Trophy. Is Lott the cornerback one? I believe Lott is cornerback.
Lott, yeah, Norman Lott.
So he won.
Omar Norman Lott. Oh my God, no, it's Ronnie Lott. I think it was Ronnie Lott.
Ronnie Lott, yeah, okay,
yeah.
Long story short, he won the award for best wide receiver in college football. He won the award for best cornerback in college football. He was a unanimous All-American. He won the Heisman Trophy. We know what he is. He's a star cornerback. He's a star wide receiver. He's explosive. He displays body control as a receiver. He's a playmaker on the ball. We talked about it all yesterday. That's Travis Hunter. Tell us about Abdul Carter. And Taylor, tell me who you would ultimately rather if they're both sitting there at pick number 4.
It's tough. I honestly don't know if I have my answer now because I think
know.
yesterday I said Abdul Carter, and now I'm like, feet to the fire. And the reason I say Abdul Carter is because of mostly the positional value, because I think that Travis Hunter will be a cornerback in the NFL. But they both have positional versatility that I think could be huge for the Patriots. Now, for Travis Hunter, he can play on both sides of the ball. And that's really where it's going to be. I think most likely his role in the NFL, and I know he's going to the draft or going to the combine as a defensive back. So he's probably going to be a corner at the next level primarily. And I think that makes the most sense. I think that he probably is going to deal with less contact as a cornerback. And while he does have the frame to add more muscle, I think if he gets to like 195, he's good. Like at 195, even as a receiver, I think that's where he's not going to be great outside. But if you want to put him as like a Z at times and have him go deep, I'd feel more comfortable about that because I think he has some different roles he could play, even if he is more of a role player on the offensive side of the ball. But then you look at Abdul Carter. Freaky, man. Like Penn State just has some real.
They pump him
I don't
up.
know if it's in the water. I don't know if they just know what they're doing. Apparently, they know what they're doing because they've been doing it for a while now. But really, no, Abdul Carter is just another one of those lines of crazy athletes where, like Chop Robinson, the issue with him was, he only has one move. That's worrisome. Yeah, well, he got to the NFL, and halfway through his rookie year, he learned other moves and became one of the most productive pass rushers, period, at any position in the NFL. Abdul Carter's a guy where that's not really a concern. He could use more moves, but he's got already a pretty deep bag. Like when I look at my report, first, rare size and body control. That's the biggest thing. And for the edge rushers, you want the explosiveness, you want the bend, but also a lot of the time those guys are smaller where it impacts their every down ability because the guy's like 245 pounds. You don't love him as an every down edge defender because is he going to be able to hold up against the run? And not only that, but also the body control to be able to retrace where like you go up the edge, but can you also retrace and attack the quarterback if you need to come back, because you flew too far upfield or what have you? I think he's got that. Effort and aggression are fantastic. And again, the positional versatility, really the biggest issues are the fact that he's new to the defensive line. He was more of an off-ball linebacker in previous seasons. So sometimes you can see he doesn't process things quite as quickly at the new perspective because it's one thing when you're a linebacker and everything's in front of you and you get a clearer picture, especially as a run defender. Very different when you're on the edge and you can only see half of the offensive line and barely that. So you'd like to see him get more experience and be a little quicker there, but that's not really an issue because he's a young guy. He's only 21 years old. And he also has to get stronger. That's one thing. And that's pretty common. Like him and Mike Green have very similar profiles for me where both like they can get embarrassed against the run. So early on, I think Carter's probably going to be more of a linebacker, second level guy. So he can be more impactful against the run as a blitzer and things like that. We'll see a good amount of that, I think, in Mike Vrabel's scheme now. They didn't blitz linebackers a ton, honestly, but if that's what your skill set is and you've got Abdul Carter, I think you will. And then kind of like a high tower light sort of thing, you put him down and rush him off the edge on different downs, or really you can line him up wherever you want. I think Carter can have a Micah Parsons type of role where like when the Patriots played the Cowboys a couple years ago and Parsons went up against David Andrews, like David Andrews is a good pass blocker and he got embarrassed because it was just a huge mismatch. So my comps, I tried to do some Patriots comps just to be kind of fun. For Travis Hunter, I did mushroom Marcus Jones, like in Mario. If you eat the mushroom, it's like, because that's literally what he is. They're both freak athletes, great ball skills. They're just instinctive and can do both things. But Marcus Jones, not really a receiver, more of a gadget guy. But Travis Hunter has the size and the athleticism and just the God-given ability. I don't know if he watched a ton of football or what it is, but the guy is a natural, even though he's still raw technically in both fields. So mushroom Marcus Jones for him. And then for Abdul Carter, I said better Kyle Van Noy. And I don't like saying better because I feel like that's condescending. Like Kyle Van Noy's been to Pro Bowls. The guy's a Super Bowl champion multiple times.
Yeah, but Abdul Carter also has that ceiling to be like an all-pro, one of the best defensive ends in football type guy.
And that's what I'm saying. Like he's more twitched up. He's not as strong. Like Kyle Van Noy was strong, but like he's looser. He's more explosive. He's got a deeper bag of pass rush moves. Like Kyle Van Noy is a good player, but he wasn't ever scaring you just as a pure edge rusher. It was like, in a good scheme, this guy's a nightmare because he's so smart, he's athletic, and he can do different stuff and line up in certain places. So I've got like better Kyle Van Noy for Abdul Carter. Man, I'm kind of.
Who would you rather?
Kind of stalling. I was kind of stalling.
Yeah, you were, but that's okay.
I will go with Travis Hunter just because of how rare he is. And I think yesterday I said Abdul Carter, and again, that's the positional value. But I think as hard as it is to even be in the range to get them, you can find an Abdul Carter type you don't find Travis Hunters. You don't see two-way players or guys you even want to really play on two sides of the ball, much less to the extent of a Hunter. So as of February 18th,
at 325,
I would take Travis Hunter over Abdul Carter if given the opportunity. But realistically, Travis Hunter's probably going to be gone for the Patriots. Abdul Carter's the only guy I think. Actually, no, he went number 1 in Daniel Jeremiah's draft. So I would take either one if they fell at 4. But yeah, I'll give Travis Hunter the edge.
I kind of wish you went Abdul Carter because I'm taking Travis Hunter and we could have had a little debate or at least a little contrast. But I agree. It's Travis Hunter. He's so good. It's the fact that he does both. Like, it really is. And, the obvious rebuttal there is, well, if he does both and he gets hurt, then you lose a cornerback and a wide receiver. And, that's obvious. But with what he's done throughout the course of his college career, we talked about it a lot yesterday, but he clearly is completely dedicated to this craft where he was able to condition and sustain that ability to play elite football on both sides of the ball for so long. And yes, the NFL is a different breed. It's different. It's a different game. Guys are bigger, faster, stronger, that whole thing. But I don't see him doing both truly at the next level, but his ability to play both in spurts makes him, that much better of a player, of a prospect. I think if he's there, you take him. For what it's worth, at the Pro Bowl, Drake May was asked who the number 1 pick should be, and he said Travis Hunter. So it sounds like he has a fan in the Patriots quarterback.
Just because he wants Abdul Carter on his team.
Yeah, that's a good point. And so I'm going to go with Travis Hunter too. I think if they're both there, that's the pick. I don't think both are going to be there. It's probably going to be one or the other.
Both will not be there. Both will not be
there. There's no way both are there. I would gladly take either one. So with that being said, Taylor, let's get into our top 5. I'll have you go first. And I think what we do is you tell us about them. You go through the strengths. You go through the weaknesses. Talk a little bit about them. And then we can kind of just go back and forth. I don't know if we necessarily need much debate here because it's really just guys who could be on the Patriots.
It's like quick thoughts on whoever the other
we're just telling you guys about them. So if we have a thought, we'll go. And if not, we'll kind of move into the next one. So without further, and we'll go 5 to 1, who kind of rank these as much as we can.
Build the suspense
on who we like better or worse for the Patriots in first round. So Taylor, who's your number 5 prospect for the Patriots in round 1?
So number 5, I've got tight end Tyler Warren out of Penn State. Now, I understand this may be controversial because one, positional value, he's not a wide receiver. Also, who takes a tight end in the top 10? And as much as I do like Tyler Warren, he is not Brock Bowers, right? Very different types of players, first of all. Right. I think Brock Bowers is more of the flex. Tyler Warren is going to be a flex early on, but I think he's got wide potential with some more refinement. So quick background on Tyler Warren before I really get into the nitty-gritty. 6'6", 265 pounds. That's prototypical for an inline tight end. 3-star recruit in the 2022 class, so not crazy or anything. 3rd team All Big Ten in 2023, and his background apparently with his family is very athletic at the college level. Strengths for me, prototypical size and athleticism. Again, his acceleration and yak ability. I think his role could be very similar to what we see in Hunter Henry, especially when he first got to New England and worked under Josh McDaniels, where in 11 personnel, he's in line. In 12 personnel, you move him around a lot more and kind of use him as a fullback, a move tight end, even split him out wide in some obvious passing situations, a la Rob Gronkowski, where he's got that true kind of positional and alignment versatility. With his acceleration, though, when he catches the ball, my biggest not even gripe, but with Hunter Henry, as great as he is, he lacks the explosiveness he used to have. So he can threaten vertically because he's got size, but after the catch, he doesn't give you much. Tyler Warren, one, kind of gives you those Gronk vibes where he can just bully smaller defenders after the catch, where like against USC is known for not tackling. I'd watched one game of Tyler Warren and they didn't really throw to him much. And then on the first drive against USC, I think they threw him 3 screens and targeted him like 5 times. They were like, we're making a statement. If you can't tackle, we are going to feed Tyler Warren. And literally this man was like dragging multiple defenders. So again, kind of Rob Gronkowski-esque there. College defender is going to be very different in the NFL, but he's physical and he gets up to top speed quickly to maximize yards after catch. Catch radius, ball skills, concentration, all fantastic. This guy can adjust to passes outside of his frame. He can bring it in when there's guys trying to get it out, and he can adjust when it's kind of a funky pass. Also, the positional versatility. I mentioned he can be a fullback. He can split out wide and just use his frame to beat defensive backs or make linebackers and safeties uncomfortable. He also played wildcat quarterback and did literally everything. Like,
Okay.
he did it so much, they actually would design sneaks where the quarterback would sneak under center and then do the quarterback sneak because Tyler Warren was such a big part of their Wildcat package. The guy could keep it on options. He also threw a few times. I think he actually threw a touchdown. So I don't think he's going to do a whole lot of that with Drake May. There's not really a reason for him to. But Josh McDaniels, he will maximize versatility if he finds it. We saw it with number 81 and just him being used all over the formation. We also know that if you can throw the ball, you're going to get an opportunity to do it. So I think he'd be a great fit offensively, especially in the passing game. Now, as a run blocker, he's got the effort and he's got the want to. I think technically, though, he does need some refinement. There are some times where he'll whiff on blocks and his hand placement isn't great, so he'll not be able to really sustain. So raw technician overall, his routes also aren't super deceiving or anything like that. So he can become a more nuanced player, add more functional strength. I think that'll also help him as a run blocker. But overall, man, he's got the profile to be a Pro Bowl tight end. And in this class where it's stacked, even if it's not Tyler Warren, I would love to see the Patriots double dip at the position and kind of get back to being that super versatile offense, because we know Drake May can kill you over the middle all day. And with that 2 tight end offense, you control and dictate the middle of the field. I would love for New England to get back to that and really create the kind of offense that has those multiple pieces that scare you, because when we look back at the offense for the past 5+ years, there's not a whole lot of scheme versatility. And even if they had the players who could do it, we didn't actually see it maximized. So I'd love to see them get back to that.
That's fun. The tight end talk makes me excited about the rounds 2 and 3 guys, because we talked about my guy the other day. We'll probably get on him. We'll see which guy takes him in that one. But I like it. I like the idea of bringing in a tight end. We'll see if they ultimately do it in the first round. It feels like there's probably more pressing needs. But at the end of the day, a player like Tyler Warren is a player like Tyler Warren. So that's Taylor's number 5 guy from, yes.
And I will just say really quickly, this would be after a trade down scenario. I'm not comfortable with him really at 4. I agree. I would rather take a lineman, specifically Mason. Just kidding. I'm going to tell you later. I'm not going to say who it is. But yes, this would be after trading to 6 or somewhere later inside the top 10. Also, my Patriots comp for him was more versatile, less otherworldly Rob Gronkowski.
Okay, I like it.
So I don't think he's the guy who takes over playoff games and stuff like that, but I do think that he's going to be a guy who's an impact player and a huge difference maker.
Love it. All right, my number 5 guy, Taylor, and you mentioned the trade up, trade down thing the trade back with Tyler Warren. My first 3 guys, as we go from 5 to 1, the first 3 are either guys who are in trade up in the first round or trade back in the first round scenario, and then my last 2 are guys who I would consider taking at number 4. And my first one here is Ohio State wide receiver, that's not him. That's Will Campbell. Emeka Egbuka, a 6'1", 205-pound wide receiver for the Buckeyes. He had 2 seasons of 1,000+ yards for Ohio State in his 4-year career. It was 2022 and 2024. We'll talk about it a little bit later, but in 2023, he missed some games due to injury, so he did not eclipse that 1,000-yard mark. He was a national champion with Ohio State this year. He was a second-team All-Big Ten player in 2022 and third-team in 2023 and 2024. Now, strengths, he's incredibly fast, and he's an instinctive playmaker. The 6'1", 205 build gives him that ability to play inside and outside. He's also a plus route runner and seems to understand and feel zone coverage very, very well from what I've seen, and that tells me he would be a fit in this Josh McDaniels system, guy who, again, has the versatility to play inside as well as outside. Now, concerns, they're obvious, and I just mentioned them. He's had an injury history. 2023, he had tightrope surgery on a busted ankle. He missed 3 games, only ended up with 500 yards and 4 touchdowns that season. But the good news is that it's not necessarily soft tissue. It's more of an ankle sprain. You fix it, and you keep going. So, look, this is a guy who has the experience. He's played 3 seasons. He's not terribly young. Don't have his age off the top of my head, but he played 4 full seasons with Ohio State. So he's, more of a vested veteran than he has a quick 1 year and out type of guy in Egbuka. And at the end of the day, his fit with this team, I mentioned it, but he's a guy who can eat on the inside, but also has the ability to play all over the field. And the 6'1", 205 frame, Patriots comp kind of gives me Jacoby Myers vibes, where, yeah, he's going to be that inside, bigger slot type of player, but also has the ability to move on the outside as well, move across the formation if needed. And it's somebody who, frankly, again, I don't see them taking the number 4 pick, trading back to 12 and taking him. I more so see them using pick 38, moving up to 25 to 32 and taking a guy in Ibuka who's falling. So again, he's not the perfect prospect. He's not like the guys we're going to talk about a little later as we get to it. But if they're sitting there back into the first round and a guy like this is falling and they haven't already used that first pick or a ton of free agency capital on a wide receiver, then I'm down for them to take Ibuka in the back end of the first round.
I don't not like him. I think Ibuka is a very good player. My issue is for the Patriots, where I think you need somebody who is a home run threat in some way, where like a Tet McMillan, where no, he doesn't have great speed, although he is pretty fast, but he is so big that you can literally just throw it up to him downfield and he can get it. Or you have like a Matthew Golden, where he's fast, he's smaller, but he's got the speed to seriously threaten you vertically or run away from a defense, but rip off huge plays with his speed after the catch. With Ibuka, I think he's very smart. He seems like a great teammate. He seems like a kind of guy who would be the leader of a room. Great route runner, catches anything that's in his area. Like I love all of those things. And I agree with the Myers comp because I think he's just a great football player.
Cerebral, right, bingo.
Exactly. Like, and that's the thing where he's not JSN, where I think JSN is big enough and a little bit faster where he is more of a vertical threat. And to me, he really is kind of like JSN light. And for the Patriots, if they did trade back into the end of the first round, I want either a home run threat in some way, or I want a lineman. So for me, like, I do like the player. And if the Patriots had a number one, if he was their number two, I would be all for it. I'd be cool with it. But when you need trench help, when you need explosiveness defensively and offensively, I do think he can bring explosiveness. But I don't think he's going to bring that third level, right? Where it's like short to intermediate, he's going to be good. Double moves, he's going to be able to not take the top off, but create that vertical kind of production. I just don't know that he's the kind of guy who can create it just with his own tools. I feel like he's going to need a little bit of help from scheme.
Yeah, for sure. No, it makes sense. It's a fair, not argument, because it's not really, it's just a sort of back and forth on this. But we'll see where it goes. I think at the end of the day, if it's at that back end of the first round spot, again, it depends on what they bring in free agency wise. Could be a decent option. Like you said, potentially it could be a number two, depending on what you get in free agency. So we'll see what happens there. But Taylor, who is your number 4 prospect that fits the Patriots in the first round?
Number 4, I have Jaylen Carter.
Okay.
I really like him. He's a guy who's coming on late for me. Now, like, I mean, only coming on late relatively. We're still very early in the process, and I'm still learning people, but he's super exciting. So 6'2", 245 pounds out of Georgia. Background, he's 20 years old. He was 20 years old. I want to emphasize that. He's going to be 21 next year, I believe. I believe or something. Oh, no, I'm sorry. He's 21 in February. My bad. I got it mixed up. I'm way ahead. Or next week. Next week is his birthday.
Jaylen Walker. Jaylen Walker.
What did I say?
Jaylen Carter. I would love Jaylen Carter. Don't get me wrong.
I can't believe they let me on TV. I cannot believe they let me on TV. All right, we're going to start over. I've got it, number 4, Jaylen Walker out of Georgia, 6'2", 245-pound linebacker who also has edge versatility. 20 years old. He will turn 21 next week. 4-star recruit in the 2022 class. Now, injuries, 2023, he had offseason shoulder surgery for a labrum. He did miss some spring practices. That was it. In terms of strengths, I've got size, length, and range of a modern off-ball linebacker, and that's what we're thinking Mike Vrabel is probably going to transition to, because when he was in Tennessee, his guys were more like in the 230, 245 kind of range, not really in that 250, 260-ish mold that we've typically seen with Patriots inside linebackers. So he's got the size to be that off-ball guy. He's got burst, bend, and body control to rush from anywhere in the defensive front. The biggest thing for me that stood out was the bend specifically. For a guy that can play off-ball linebacker, it's ridiculous, because primarily when he started out at Georgia, he was actually a third down pass rusher. And I had watched, I think it was against Texas. It was one of the Texas games where I watched him as an edge rusher kind of briefly while I was watching another player on this list. And I thought, I don't really see it as a pass rusher. I just think maybe they weren't good reps, because once I went through, and just for the sake of clarity, these first impressions are really based on our initial impressions, based on like background information, highlights, word of mouth. As we go deeper into this process, we'll get deeper into like me being able to watch more full games, because I just don't have the time and I want to get an idea of as many prospects as possible. But there's a flip side to both, because if you watch the wrong game, you may have the wrong impression of a player. And if you watch the highlights and just that, you may think he's great at something he's not based on a smaller sample size. But when I looked at the highlights, I was like, oh, now I'm seeing the traits where he is that freaky pass rusher. While he is a bit undersized, and that's why I don't know if he can be an every down rusher because he is 245 pounds. Even if he bulks up, that might be tough, but he can get around that edge. He doesn't really go through offensive linemen, but he can get inside or outside different ways. And he's got enough range where he can be a quarterback spy. He can come around on blitzes. He can be effective that way. Now, in terms of the things that I don't really love, the fact that he's mostly been an edge rusher, it's kind of like Abdul Carter, where he was mostly an off-ball guy, not super experienced on the line. It's the opposite for Walker. He doesn't have a ton of experience off the ball, and that kind of shows in his diagnosis, much more experienced in the trenches. So his instincts when he's at linebacker are a bit shaky. He's going to need some time to develop. Again, undersized for an edge rusher, so he is that tweener type. You're going to have to use him in certain ways. But a very important distinction is like tweener can sometimes mean, okay, you're not really good at anything. Like Keon White, outside of like being an interior rusher, he's very good at. But like his first year, he seemed like a jack of all trades, where it's like, yeah, he's pretty good at a lot of things, but he's not great at anything. Walker is a great pass rusher, and I think he has the tools to be a great early down off-ball linebacker once he gets more experience under his belt, which I think is realistic if the Patriots have at least one veteran at the linebacker position. Another thing, instead of trying to get around blocks as a run defender, he tries to get through them, which I appreciate. I love when a guy's willing to stick his hands in a guy's chest and just shed. But also, if your skill set is more to just, weave and get out of the way, I think that's what you should do. So again, these are things you can fix. Right. Outside of him being a bit of a tweener body type, he's got the tools to be a very good player. I think Pro Bowl potential early on. My Patriots comp for him was Dante Hightower light. Okay. Dante got a lot of shit early in his career as an off-ball linebacker because people were like, oh, he can't read he can't read his keys. He sucks in coverage, all these things. But once he got a few years under his belt, similar to Juwan Bentley and Landon Roberts, to be honest, early on in their careers, they got a lot of crap for not being great in coverage and off the ball. But once they got more time, they figured it out and then were able to maximize their gifts. And you just so rarely find someone who can do both off-ball responsibilities and rush the passer at a high level. So between the positional value, I think this guy's going to test off the charts at the combine. I think that he would make sense. Ideally in a trade down situation, I don't love him at 4. I will say that because, again, he's going to be playing a lot of linebacker for you. So that does make it a little bit more sketchy. But I think because he's such a good pass rusher that he does have some value at 6th overall if you can get him, or 6th or 7th or somewhere in that range.
Interesting. Okay, that's kind of that would probably be the sweet spot. The number 4 is a little bit of a stretch. I feel like at that point with, again, with a lot of these guys sitting at the number 4, number 5 range for us, it's more so where's the value if you trade up, trade back, etc. So don't love it at 4, but again, that's just because there's going to be better players there. But I don't hate the idea of bringing a guy like Jaylen. I mean, realistically, anyone who's played on that Georgia defensive line in the last 10 years is somebody who, as Howie Roseman, as you see in Philly, is someone who you want on your football team, no matter where in the first round. So at the end of the day, I wonder when we're looking at defense for this team in the first round, I really like Carter. I really like Travis Hunter. I don't know how much I like everybody else, depending on where you are, but at the 4 and 5 range in our rankings, I'm okay with it as well. I'll get
also notable that Daniel Jeremiah, real quick, flipped his so in his first mock for Daniel Jeremiah, Jaylen Walker was like top 16, or I think he was 16th he was supposed to go. And in this round, I think he's like 6th. So the Georgia guys have actually flipped from being like top 15, top 16, or top 5 or top 10 and gone in different places. So I feel like the combine is going to do a lot when it comes to their stock, because I think both guys are going to do great. And I think we're going to be talking about them both inside the top 10 by the time we get deeper into the weeds with draft season.
Well, and that's why combine, pro days, 30 visits, reports, more mock drafts from that's what's going to really refine this whole process for us. Right now, we're just using it as a throw out our notebooks, look at these guys, and see who could potentially be there. I'll give you my number 4 guy in just a second, but first we got to pay the bills. A quick word from our friends at Prize Picks. We'll be right back. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money, sports action with over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all, and all you have to do is pick more or less on at least 2 players for your shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. So run your game all season long on Prize Picks. An all-star weekend is almost here, and Prize Picks is the best place to win cash while watching your favorite players during the game and Saturday night's events like the 3-point contest. So make sure to sign up on Prize Picks today and use that code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, that is code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. Thank you to Prize Picks, as always, for sponsoring this show and this video specifically. Four Nations Face-Off continues on Thursday. Charlie McAvoy of the Bruins, unfortunately out of that one, was hospitalized with apparently an infection on an upper body injury, but Quinn Hughes is back. We'll see if he can get into Mike Sullivan and Team USA's lineup and make a difference. We'll try and throw him in a Prize Picks lineup coming up on Thursday. And then the Celtics are back later on this week as well, and we will start to pump out those lineups again. So if you want to join, if you want to follow along, make sure to use that code CLNS on the Prize Picks app. You get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. All right, Taylor, my number 4 player here in first round fits for the Patriots is none other than left tackle Kelvin Banks from Texas, a guy who is 6'4", 320 pounds, which you hear 6'4", it's a little bit on the smaller side for an offensive tackle. We will get to that, but he's 6'4", 320. He was a unanimous All-American in 2024. He won the Outland Trophy in 2024 as the nation's top tackle in the game. He allowed just 4 sacks over 3 years of play. Strengths of this guy: he's quick, he has smooth footwork, and he is a fluid athlete. He is a plus athlete at the tackle position. He's not just a lump out there. He's a guy who can, really get around and make things happen. He's a mauler on the outside and the second level in the run game. And he's someone who, with that quickness and smooth footwork, he's also a very smart athlete. He's another high IQ football player, which I think anybody wants, but specifically the Patriots heading into the season will look for now those concerns. As I mentioned, he's a little bit on the smaller side, and that sometimes will force him to overextend and then lose. He also has a little bit of a balance issue, which I've sort of seen and I've read a few times in a bunch of different scouting reports. And a balance issue when you're only 6'4" kind of allows you allows your size to get the best of you. So at the end of the day, I feel like early on, or later on rather, in last season, it was a Will Campbell, Kelvin Banks or bust type of thought with Patriots fans and with this sort of offensive tackle room and how things went. Now, as things go on, people looking at this team, realizing that defense, wide receiver, cornerback could be more of an issue than left tackle, depending on how you fill out the rest of the room. So at the end of the day, I wouldn't take Banks at 4. He's somebody who, in a trade back scenario, or even in a trade-up scenario, if for some reason he does fall and other tackles rise in teams' rankings, if he's sitting there in the 20s for some reason, I would go pay the price and go get him all day. He's another potential left tackle, which we'll talk about somebody else later, who you could pair with Drake May for the foreseeable future. However, I'm less inclined on him than another guy to take at like the number 4 pick, if that makes sense.
So one of my guys actually got one of those few sacks against your guy. We'll talk about that later. And I get it. Kelvin Banks, he's got kind of somewhat of similar, like, glaring issues to me with Will Campbell, where I'm just thinking, like, unless you really trade back, like you are past the 10s, I just don't like either of those guys as tackles. Like, even Will Campbell, so the precedent for, and I know that with Kelvin Banks, like, there's even some talk about him maybe having to move into guard. Okay. And like, if you're talking top 6, the precedent for taking a guard is like Brandon Sheriff and Quentin Nelson. So he has to be an all-pro guard. And even if he is, and you look at the Patriots' needs, it's like, okay, we need tackles, we need wide receivers, we need defensive linemen. I'm not a huge positional value guy because I think at the end of the day, like, your role and your impact makes more of a difference. But like, when you have all those guards, like we talked about it earlier, they've got enough. If you're drafting a guy that's going to be a guard in a couple of years, like, again, I admit that I flip-flop on this a bit because I want to justify taking Will Campbell, but it's like the same argument for, I think, Kelvin Banks. It's like, you want to take just a good left tackle when you can have a great defensive lineman or, a great wide receiver. I don't think there's a ton of great wide receivers necessarily, but I guess that's more my hang up. I do think Kelvin Banks is a good player, though, and I completely understand. It's just not my personal cup of tea.
No, that's fine. And it's why, again, in this rankings, like if they took him at 4, I'd probably be disappointed. I wouldn't see it. But if there's a scenario where, again, it's why we're dumping our notepads out and saying these are guys who could potentially work and could be first rounders. You got to throw it on a team that has such little help at tackle right now. You got to at least throw his name into the mix and see where he falls. So who you got at number 3?
So number 3 for me, I have Mike Green, edge defender out of Marshall, 6'4", 251 pounds, we actually now know, as of the Senior Bowl. He was a 3-star recruit as a wide receiver in the 2021 class, kind of continues the trend of him just being a freak athlete. Transferred from Virginia ahead of 2023. He was a 2024 Sun Belt Player of the Year, first team all Sun Belt, and he led the FBS, in sacks and tackles for loss. Very productive player. Now, he's also had no major injuries. That's huge. Now, I have heard whispers of some off-field concerns. That is something that could potentially affect him. I know that some teams may have actually taken him off their boards because of this. So as things come out, we'll know more. But I do know that is something that must be acknowledged, because if that wasn't the case, I would say you should take him with 4, and I would not even think twice about it over every single other person on this list.
Go as high as number 4 with Mike Green. As
high as number 4. If it weren't, if he checked out and the Patriots were like medically off field, we have no issues with this kid, I would. Watching him, it's really my favorite thing about scouting is when a player has a style that you just see so rarely, whether it's effort, power, athleticism, things like that, where you're just like, oh shit. Like, basically when I'm watching the guy, and Liz knows that I like him because I'm like audibly like, oh my God, that happened watching Mike Green. The biggest thing for me, on top of the physical tools, like he's twitched up, elite burst and bend. He has a deep bag of pass rush moves. Like he can pull out anything. And that's really scary for offensive tackles, because truly at the level of play he was at a small school, guys could barely get their hands on him, much less make any significant contact. Like, that's how fast he's getting off the ball. That's how bendy he is. That's how slippery he is as a defensive lineman. Again, was playing like just under 250 pounds last year. Pretty impressive. Also a very quick processor. Like, you can see he knows certain things are coming. Like, if he's upfield and he's not blocked, he knows a puller's coming and he'll work against it. Also, when option plays, like when they leave him unblocked, it's a huge risk, because he could blow up the play before you even hand the ball off, or he can play both options. Like, athletically, he's got everything you want in an edge defender. There are some concerns I'll get to later, but for me, it's his effort and his motor. We say hot, like there's sometimes I'll say like a guy's got a white hot motor. And honestly, watching Mike Green is going to change how I describe players' motors, because this guy is like a Terminator whose prime directive, if that's what they have, or mission or whatever, is to end every play unblocked and around the ball. Like, he refuses to get blocked. Like, there's plays where you'll see him retrace. There's one where like he rushes the passer, he shoots his move, sees the quarterback is trying to throw, gets his hands up to bat it down, getting the quarterback to stop the throw, then retraces and ends up trying twice to get the sack, gets it on the second try. Like, he does 4 different things in one play while just rushing the passer. That kind of effort where he's like, you will not end this play blocking me. I'm going to get around you. And then on top of that, if there's a play on the other side of the field and it's down the field, he'll work to get off the block and run just in case it's a fumble so he can fall on it. And literally that happened in a game. I don't know if he actually fell on the fumble. I didn't look it up to see if he recovered. But like, he wasn't by the play and just on pure effort put himself in position to potentially get a fumble. That is championship level effort, where like the play truly, until the last sound of the whistle, this guy is going. I love his play style. I love his tools. Now, the big issues with him, one, he's got to get bigger. He's got to get stronger. There was a game against Louisiana. Like, Louisiana is not a big program, not a whole lot of NFL talent from Louisiana, but they have some pretty big offensive linemen, and they bullied Mike Green. Like, literally threw him around, pancaked him. It was not pretty. Prime example for me of why he needs to get bigger so he can be more sturdy against the run and be a 4-down player, because he's not like an Abdul Carter where he can play off the ball and that kind of protects him. He's going to be in the trenches. So early on, he's probably going to be more of a rotational rusher. And that's where you say, okay, if I'm picking him 4th overall as an edge rusher and he's only going to be playing some of the time, is that good value? I say yes, because he has the instincts, the effort, and the tools, I think, to be a good run defender if he gets bigger. And he's already at 250. Like, he already started putting on weight. I think by next year, if he's like right under 260, I would feel a lot better about him. And then his strikes. They're inconsistent in terms of the accuracy and the timing. And you saw that a lot in the Senior Bowl where like he was dominant and he got to leave early because he had such success against better competition. And that was the big reason he wanted to go, was to show I don't just dominate smaller competition. I can hang with the
I dominate everybody.
But he didn't. He had losses against Anthony Belton, Ariante Ursary, and Ozzie Trapillo, I believe. And all of them, he tried to shoot a move. Either it wasn't smart, like he tried a bull rush against Ursary. Don't do that. That man is 330 pounds. You're not going to push him back. Or he would try like a spin move or some kind of chop, and he would shoot it too early, and the blocker just kept their hands and then waited. Or he missed his strike. So needs to be more accurate and time him better, needs to get bigger. But other than that, like this is an all-pro caliber player. I called him looser, less powerful Chandler Jones. I still think he's got some power in his hands, but like Chandler had a ton of pass rush moves, as we know, was a great athlete, like had everything you wanted. I don't know if he's still going to go to the Hall of Fame, all things considered, but is one of the best sack artists in NFL history. I think Mike Green, it's a very lofty standard. And again, he needs to fill out, but if he does, I think that he is going to be one of the scariest pass rushers at any position in the NFL.
It gets me excited. It's clearly like they have a need at this position that I mentioned it before, talking about tackles and wide receivers, where everyone kind of focuses on that. But if they can come out of this draft with a premier edge rusher who starts as a guy who is situational and kind of develops into somebody that can play on every single down, that's money. That's bingo. And as much as I hesitate on just taking him straight up at 4 and rather play, I guess, roll the dice, see if you can trade back and get him. I would prefer, and I think you would too. Obviously, you would rather that with just about anybody. But this feels like a prospect who you may be able to do that with instead. But at the end of the day, nobody's going to care what pick you used on him as long as he's good. And it's not a comp skill set wise necessarily, but the comp where small school, defensive end type, early pick, nobody really remembers, because Khalil Mack played at Buffalo. Like he wasn't a top guy, but he was he had the 3rd pick overall spent on him, and nobody cares because he's awesome. And so if Mike Green turns into just an awesome football player and the Patriots pick him at 4, that's a-okay. So we'll see what happens, but ultimately they need a defender, and that would be a lovely fit if they can get him at some point on this team. All right, my third guy, Taylor, I'm curious how you feel about this, is Michigan's Will Johnson. It's another one. It's my last guy who not comfortable necessarily at number 4 because I think there's bigger needs. It's more of the 6 to 10 range if he's there. Trade back to there and grab this guy, but 6'2", 202 pounds, huge frame, national champion with Michigan 2 years ago. He was the defensive MVP in that game, actually. He was a first-team All-American 2 seasons ago, a second-team All-American this season, 9 career interceptions over 3 seasons. I mentioned that big frame. He has that size, so he can kind of manhandle guys on the outside, but he also has very fluid hips, which allow him to be very good in man coverage, but he's also an instinctual player. He's aggressive, which allows him to play well in zone, which that means he's scheme versatile. So whatever this team decides to play, more heavy man, more heavy zone in the back end, I'm confident in Will Johnson coming in to a scheme and playing well regardless. So as far as fit, he's just a really good damn defensive football player, and if you can get him, bring him in. He's also not afraid to drop his nose in and make a tackle, which when we talked about Christian Gonzalez a couple of years ago, it was, okay, he's got really fluid hips. He's sticky like glue to the wide receivers. He can follow their hips and he can do everything. But sometimes he's kind of scared to tackle. Not scared, but sometimes doesn't necessarily get his nose in. Now, Gonzo's sort of fixed that narrative and he's played better as a tackler. But Will Johnson reads, reacts, and goes. And that aggressiveness is huge for him. And it's a huge strength of his. It can also be a concern. He can over pursue. He can sometimes get lost because he's ball hawk heavy and he wants to be that guy who goes and makes the big play. And with any cornerback, you have to kind of hone that in and not try and be over aggressive all the time. But you see it a lot with a guy like Will Johnson. And that aggressiveness and his want to go make a tackle, the aggressiveness also makes him prone to miss tackles here and there. So look, at the end of the day, with the team fit, trade down scenario, take him. You create a dominant 1-2 punch at cornerback with him and Gonzo. We talked about it on the show yesterday where cornerback is quickly turning into a position here where it can quickly deplete. You really only have Christian Gonzalez and Marcellus Dial under contract after this season. So you're going to need to make something happen. You can patch it together with just Gonzo and everything else for now. But if Will Johnson's there and you trade back and you say, let's just take the best player available, I wouldn't necessarily hate it. So as much of, is he a fit in his cornerback a need as much as some of these other positions? No, not necessarily. But you tell me you have Will Johnson and Christian Gonzalez on both sides for the next couple of years, I'm down for that too.
It's exciting, and I would entertain it if they were better in the trenches, but I just always go back to Mike Pellegrino saying that the best thing that helps a cornerback or your coverage is the pass rush. And so for me, that's where the positional value does play a role. And for Travis Hunter, like, oh, you're talking about Travis Hunter. Not only can he play wide receiver, but his instincts, like I didn't even mention this when I talked about him, his ability to make plays outside of his primary coverage is where you say, okay, he's not just like a Pro Bowler, he's an all-pro. If everything goes well, he could be a Hall of Famer because he's able to, like, already as a guy who doesn't play the position full-time, not just bait quarterbacks, but actually lead his coverage assignment and make plays elsewhere. Like, that's a very, very, very rare trait for a cornerback. And I haven't watched a ton of Will Johnson, to be honest, so I'm not going to speak too highly about if he's good or not. I'm just saying preference-wise, Travis Hunter for me is the outlier that I
100%.
would take a cornerback early on in the draft, considering what the Patriots' needs are. So yeah, it's really just a scheme fit thing for me. And also, I know that he dealt with some injuries. I feel like that was maybe a question mark for him.
Okay.
That would really be the other big reason that I'd be hesitant for him specifically. But very good player, and I hope at some point the Patriots can, if it's Paulson, Adebo, or whoever, get another like a lockdown corner,
right,
where it's just pick your poison, like the Eagles.
100%. That's the thing where. I guess maybe if I were to look back and re-rank it, it's almost like maybe that's the thing. I don't know if you want to put Kelvin Banks over this guy at number 3, but I also don't know if I like Banks' fit. So I just look at number 4 pick-ish, top 10, elite prospect, go get him. I don't love the idea. The other 2 guys I'm going to talk about, I would much rather take early on in the draft, but he's a cornerback at a position of relative need. And if at the end of the day they say best player available and Will Johnson's there, again, I wouldn't necessarily hate it. All right, Taylor, we got 2 more each. Who is your number 2 prospect that fits the Patriots in the first round?
So like my number 2 prospect is actually my favorite prospect, but in terms of just being logical and trying to do what makes the most sense, he's my number 2 in terms of Patriots fits. I've got Georgia edge defender Mykel Williams, 6'5", 265 pounds, only 20 years old, a 5-star recruit in the 2022 class. So he's played like Paris Johnson. He's played Brandon Coleman. Like, I was going through his highlights and I'm like, he's sacked Joe Milton. He's sacked Spencer Rattler. Like, obviously you don't have to be around a whole lot because Milton and Rattler were around last year, but it was just kind of funny to see where his production came from and seeing some familiar faces. He was 2023 second team all SEC. Injuries in 2024, he had an ankle injury. He missed 2 games, was actually playing hurt apparently last season. I believe it was Daniel Jeremiah who mentioned it in one of his mock drafts, which I didn't really know because I just watched him. He's a bigger guy. I didn't expect him to. His movement skills already surprised me. So the fact that he had an injury and was playing like that, it's kind of good and bad where it's like, okay, if he's healed from it, it's not a long-term issue. Awesome. But unfortunately, it's not the only lower body injury he's had in 2023. On top of an illness, he missed 1 game, obviously not lower body. He did have a toe injury that required all-season surgery, and he missed spring practices. So that's just the background. But the tools, man. This guy's got tools for days. I'm honestly going to get the bad out of the way first. He's got disappointing burst off the line when he doesn't time the snap. Like he isn't just like he's not a Mike Green or an Abdul Carter where he's like shot out of a cannon and he gets on you in a hurry and you're like, not quite to that extent. So that's the one thing. And also, as a pass rusher, this is really the big bugaboo with his game. Very raw as a pass rusher and had very little production. Like, his pass rush grade was pretty low. I think that's a big reason he was second team all SEC. And whenever anybody, like when I mentioned how Daniel Jeremiah had him in the top 10 and now he's in the top 15.
Right.
And the variance is, okay, do we trust that he's going to be a good enough pass rusher that we can play him on every down or even make him like a pass rush type of guy early on in his career? Or is he just going to play on early downs and develop into that? That's the kind of profile where I understand people saying, what, you want to take this guy 6th, maybe even 4th? Blech. No, not for me. And I completely understand.
Right.
My thing is, in a Mike Vrabel defense, I think the physicality is going to take priority over bend and explosiveness and things like that. So for me, what he lacks in great burst and great bend, I think he's good enough at them, but I think that his size, length, and overall athleticism are going to allow him to be a dominant player. I already told you, he's 6'5", 265 pounds. He moves more like a guy who's around like 245, like low 250, which doesn't sound great, I guess, but still for a guy who's going to be playing in a lot of even fronts. So 4 down fronts, the defensive ends or edge defenders, whatever, they need to be able to hold up against the run, but they also need to be able to get after the passer. But you can't just be out there like getting bulldozed. That's not an option. So he already comes pre-packaged as a really good run defender. For a young player, he's got good instincts. Like he knows when pullers are coming and is able to get around them or just work through them. And for the most part, I feel like he understands what's happening. It's just he doesn't know what to do with his hands as a pass rusher. Like he doesn't have a plan. So sometimes he's like playing patty cake or he's not really doing much. But when you see everything come together for him as a pass rusher, when he's able to knock down the pressure points like a wrist or an elbow or something like that, when he can control the blocker, there's not a whole lot they can do. He's longer than almost everybody he plays against, and he's powerful, and he's got just enough bend where he can create a short corner and exploit it. When I see all that, and he's got good motor, he can line up anywhere on the defensive line as a pass rusher, I like him a lot. He may not be the best fit for the Patriots with their top pick, but when I look at this guy, I'm saying I think this could be an every down, dominant, potential Pro Bowl, not just pass rusher, but defensive edge player for them. My comp for him, Patriots comp, was a more athletic Trey Flowers. And that kind of, I think that's a pretty good summary. Like Trey Flowers, edge on early downs, can kick inside. I think that Mykel Williams could just live on the outside, especially when you have Keon White and Christian Barmore, ideally, who do their work inside as pass rushers. But I think he's got that versatility to do different things on the defensive line. He can drop into coverage a little bit. And I just think very early on, when you have Terrell Williams, a renowned defensive line coach, Clint McDonald, Mike Smith, former pass rush specialist, I think they can get the best out of him. Teach him a couple moves early on, like a long arm and a double swipe or something like that. Watch this kid take off. I'm a huge fan. Would love to see him in a Patriots uniform.
So as I admitted yesterday on Twitter, and as I said on our show yesterday, I'm a little behind on my draft prep than I'd like to be at this time of year. I like to kind of have delve in a little bit more. And that's why I'm excited to use these next 3 days as sort of a primer for myself, as well as the guys watching. So haven't done a ton on Mykel Williams, but all the tweets you sent of him yesterday, just wreaking havoc along the offensive line. I tweeted, I was like, me thinks we're going to talk about this guy tomorrow. Yeah. And that's exactly what we did. So if you haven't seen it, go check out Taylor's Twitter. He posted a ton of film on Mykel Williams. And he's a guy who, again, you mentioned the motor and just sort of gets after to someone who, again, I don't know about where they sit at 4, where they sit at 38, how you can mend that fence and make it happen. Because I don't know about him at 4 either. It just feels like there
trade down.
There will be better options on the table or the ability to trade down and get this guy. But look, if you can just, it's a talent thing, right? This whole Patriots rebuild is just talent. And Mykel Williams is hella talented. So if you can make it happen, I'm down for it. All right. I got 2 more left. Taylor has 1 more left. My second to last guy, Taylor, I think you're not going to like this one a ton, but LSU's Will Campbell. Now, we keep mentioning Daniel Jeremiah's mock draft that he posted this morning for NFL Network. He did have Will Campbell at the 4th pick to the Patriots. No trade down, sit and pick Will Campbell, number 4. Now, this is a guy who 6'6", 323, consensus All-American in 2024. He allowed only 4 sacks over 3 seasons, 3-time first-team All-SEC, and he's 21 years old. He has exceptional body control for somebody who's 6'6". He's smart. He's a technician. He's able to navigate and read the blocks in front of him. He's a guy who just, again, a lot of the guys and a lot of the first rounders have high football IQ, but Will Campbell is someone who just gets it on the field. He's also someone who just gets it off the field. He is a leader. He is someone, I think you had tweeted out a video of him at some point. I think it was before LSU's bowl game or something where he had a quote where it was just like, this guy's only 21, but he knows what.
Yeah, very mature. Yeah,
he gets it. He's mature, and he'll come in at a captain level probably as a rookie. Now, the concern is the concern, and it's the arm length. And he's expected to come in short on the arms at the combine next week. And that bodes the question, is he a guard or is he a tackle at the next level? And I don't like him as a guard for the Patriots. We've talked about it ad nauseum over the last couple of days. There is a logjam at guard. Don't bring in another guard. If you're confident with him at tackle, take him as a tackle. Now, the height at 6'6" can also be a weakness too. I read this on a couple scouting reports where since he's so big and tall, guys kind of get under him and guys can kind of get around him quickly, and he can kind of lose when, they get low and they bend the edge like that. So at the end of the day, if the arm length checks out, I'm good with taking Campbell at 4. If it doesn't, you pass. Now, if it does check out and you can pair him, like I said, with Banks as the left tackle of the future for Drake May for quite some time, I don't understand how you can't love a guy like Will Campbell. Again, if the arms are there. Now, if not, too many guards, too many fish to fry, pass. So it's a kind of an unknown right now, but basing it off the arm length, take Will Campbell at 4, and I'm okay with it.
So Will Campbell has been Daniel Jeremiah's pick in both of his mocks.
Okay.
And I think it's wise to use Daniel Jeremiah's mocks as a guide for wherever you are in draft season, because he does the mock drafts based on what he's hearing.
Bingo.
So what we're all missing in these mocks is actual inside information. We can all watch the tape. We can have our opinions on the players, but that doesn't really matter as much at the end of the day when there's medicals, when there's off-field things and all that. And also, Daniel Jeremiah is plugged in and has understanding of the league and how teams are feeling about their needs and things like that. It could be the Patriots telling him that they really need to address their offensive line. It could be other teams giving him the opinion that they need to. My issue is anytime I've seen Will Campbell mocked to the Patriots, it's not because he's the best player available. It's not because he's the best scheme fit. It's because their O-line sucks. That, I think, is a horrible logic to use for the 4th overall pick, right? I've already mentioned it. If you're talking about precedent for guards, no guard has gone top 5 in the past 25 years. I didn't go all the way back 25 years, but I think we're back 15 or 20. It's not a thing that happens.
Quentin Nelson, I think you meant
Quentin Nelson was
6th pick. Yeah, and that's it.
And I understand it's splitting hairs and all these things, but no, we also need to look at the team perspective. So one, drafting a guard 4th overall would be a huge outlier. On top of it, this is a team with multiple players who could play guard, even Caden Wallace. You need a left tackle. And if Will Campbell, I think his ceiling as a tackle is he will be very good. I think to be great in the NFL, you need some level of physical traits where you are exceptional. Like Julian Edelman, he was never, I think, a great wide receiver when you look at league wide, right? Like you can say great in terms of the history of the game for sure because of the Super Bowls and the playoff success. But he was never a great wide receiver league wide because he didn't have the tools to dominate any person that lined up against him. When you're talking about a left tackle, we mentioned it, where left tackles get drafted and they never leave. It's because where they get drafted, if they have a certain flaw, usually something else will really make up for it. And if you're talking about guys with short arms, one, they are never 33 inches. Like the guys, the top 10 highest paid offensive tackles right now, their arm length, the shortest ones are like Jake Matthews and not Taylor Lewan. Who is it? There's another one. I can't remember his name right now. I'm sorry. But the people with the shortest arms in the
Lewan
NFL
has short arms, and he played for Vrabel.
But Lewan didn't have 33-inch arms. He had 33 and 7/8 inches.
Okay.
We're talking, if you're sub 33 and a half, you are still a huge outlier. Like Rashawn Slater is the only comparison to Will Campbell. If you want to spend the 4th overall pick hoping that Will Campbell becomes a guy that was picked with the 17th pick, I'm sorry. We just fundamentally disagree. I think Will Campbell's a really good player. I think he's a great kid. I've tried to wrap my brain around the situation where you get him and it makes sense. I'm sorry. Maybe in a trade down, I could swallow it if he becomes an all-pro guard after a season or two at tackle. But I just cannot get on board with drafting a guy who will be a very good tackle if you could trade back into the 1st round for Ariante Ursary, or if there's any other guys like a Carson Vincent I really like, I think he's going to get drafted later, but really just because he came from a small school. So if he gets good coaching, maybe, he maximizes his potential. Ozzie Trapillo looked good at left tackle during the Senior Bowl. I'm a huge Anthony Belton guy. Mm-hmm. The team has to like these evaluations, but I'm telling you, when they're looking at offensive tackles, if they're being honest, I don't think that Will Campbell is at the top of their board. Offensive lineman, for sure. I don't think he's the top offensive tackle. So for me, don't reach 4 is such a valuable pick. Hopefully you're not even sniffing number 4 again. I would much rather fill out the rest of the roster and get a guy you think could maybe be a solid tackle than get a great guard, very good tackle, and not have maybe 2 additional picks inside the top 100, top 120.
All right. It's fine. It's fair. It's a good argument. I get it. And it's more so that's kind of the thing where I hesitate because I don't know where his arms are going to come out. But with the questions, it's clear that he's not going to come out with 35-inch arms, right? Like, he's not going to be this superhuman freak. It's clearly going to be right on the line, which is where the questions, ultimately come into play. And the fact that he may not actually be a guard or a tackle, rather, for the entirety of his career.
And I think people think the number 33.5 is just some random number that, like, I'm fixating on or that people are fixating on. There are thresholds for a reason, because when you get away from them too often, you end up getting away from certain standards you have for your players, right? So for a left tackle, you really want somebody who can shut down encounters early on. Like we talked about, it's like a boxer. If you have long arms, you're at a huge advantage because a guy can't even touch you. When you're going up against Aiden Hutchinson, Myles Garrett, and all these really long, freakish athletes who can do any pass rush move in the book and keep you on your heels because you never know what to expect. Against those guys, every quarter of an inch matters. So if you have 33.5-inch arms versus 33, that's half a foot that you are, half an inch that you have where you could have shut down an encounter sooner, and it makes it that much easier for them to put you in a compromising position. The reason I don't like Will Campbell's arm length is because he has to consistently let pass rushers close to his body. Now, usually he's very good. He knows he's got a good anchor. He's not really worried about them getting into his chest. He's also very good at getting guys around the arc. You like run the entire hoop and get around the quarterback.
Right.
But if you don't know for sure whether a guy's going left or right or inside or outside, right, and you don't have the arm length to shut down the encounter before it even really matters, then your chances of success have shot way down. Because in those obvious pass situations, if you don't have the mental advantage, right, like if you don't have the physical tools, you need to have effort and you need to be smarter. If that guy's trying just as hard, if he's just as fast, but he's a better athlete, what's going to happen?
Right. He's gone.
That's why the arm length does matter. It's a game of inches, literally. Mm-hmm. If you have half an inch less arm length than the guy across from you, that is a huge disadvantage, and you will very rarely see edge rushers at the top of their game who have arms that are less than 34 inches.
Right. And that's where you saw it in, we talked about it yesterday, but we'll mention again while we're on the subject. You saw it in the Super Bowl and through the playoffs and through the end of the season, where Joe Thuney moves from guard to tackle. He's serviceable. He makes it happen. He allows them to get to the Super Bowl, but then he gets to the big game and he has to play a bunch of beasts across the line in front of him in that Philly front seven, and he kind of got his lunch delivered to him, and he wasn't great in the game, and it's because his arms are shorter than the rest of the bunch, and it does, like you said, it puts you at a disadvantage. So we'll see what happens. I think he does obviously need to be floated in this conversation, in this scenario, especially because, like we mentioned, Daniel Jeremiah had him mocked there. All right, Taylor, lastly, your number one Patriots fit in the first round. You have one, I have one, and then we'll wrap it up. Who do you got? Who's your number one?
Yeah, this one's going to be pretty quick. It's Mason Graham, Michigan defensive tackle, 6'3", 318 pounds. Every other guy I've talked about has some kind of physical flaw or limitation on top of the fact that there's something in their game they really need to work out. Mason Graham does have size limitations. Again, this is one I'll get out of the way immediately. So his big concerns are the height and the arm length. Or I'm sorry, just the arm length and the overall kind of size, where he doesn't have very long arms, and it allows, kind of similar to Will Campbell, it's not as easy for him to initiate contact. And where that shows up most is when he has to use power, which his power, especially as a pass rusher, is pretty inconsistent, where he can't really get that strike and get into a guy's chest and extend, create that disruption that really you need to be a consistent bull rusher. So that's a bit of a question mark there. And then pad level and strike consistency could both improve. That's pretty much true for every single player that I've talked about. Mm-hmm. But other than that, Mason Graham is going to come packaged as a player who might, it's hard to say he'll make a Pro Bowl as a rookie, because as we know with Christian Barmore, there's so many good defensive tackles in the league. it's kind of hard to sit here and say that he's going to be a Pro Bowler, but he will be a Pro Bowl caliber talent and a massive difference maker up front. So one, he's an elite run defender. Even though he's not necessarily the biggest guy out there, his pad level is fantastic. His technique is always on point, and he has a wrestling background, which you really see with his hand strikes, but also in leverage, where against double teams, like, he really doesn't get moved. And that's the biggest thing with defensive tackles is he going to be sturdy? He's sturdy, but he can also be a penetrator or get around guys because he's got great bend. That bend translates as a pass rusher. Now,
Graham.
Oh gosh. Mason Graham is not really going to get through guys very often, like I mentioned, but he can get around them. He's got a devastating arm over. He can swipe the hands down, just very good at beating the hands and then getting around the man. So he's a dominant run defender, a dominant pass rusher, an absolutely fantastic motor, seems like a really high character guy, and his play recognition is also unreal. Like, the number of times I've seen him teleport into the backfield and beat pullers or whatever, either because he just diagnosed what was happening so fast that he beat the guy before he was even able to make significant contact, or his burst and get off, which are also excellent, were just so fast that nobody could get a hand on him there. I think this is a difference maker, a huge one. And premium positions, I understand it's like what guys are getting paid. Edge rushers are the ones who are really the premier position. One, because as a defensive tackle, it's much easier to create help and disrupt you and slow you down. But the nice thing is, again, Mason Graham is a guy who is going to be able to work through double teams. But the type of disruption he brings as a pass rusher, as a run defender, I don't care about positional value. This is a guy with game-wrecking potential. He showed it at one of the best programs in the country. I think it's going to translate in the NFL. So as much as I like the edge guys, it's hard for me to sit here and say that Mason Graham, if I was stuck at 4, wouldn't be my choice.
So it's now that we're getting down to the final two, and we're kind of, again, not to rush us out of here and wrap up, but it's our last two. These are guys who will be there probably at 4 and can probably be taken at number 4, and there's a reason for it. And so I don't have much pushback with Graham. The only one is maybe the premier position argument, but again, you put him on that defensive line with Barmore, with Keon, with, everyone else you have, and then maybe you grab somebody else in the later rounds. Like, you're kind of cooking with gas up front. And you mentioned the character and, the guy that he is. I think that's maybe we put a little bit too much stock in the Patriots going for that character draft last year, and that maybe, just take the best player.
Or just get guys who actually have high character and mental toughness.
Bingo. So that's another thing too, where I think it'll be important this year as well. And I'm 100% with you. I would take Mason Graham in this scenario. All right, let's wrap it up with my final guy. It is Arizona's Tet McMillan. 6'5", 212, consensus All-American in 2024. He's only 21. He's going to be 22 once the season starts in September. 2 monster back-to-back seasons for the Arizona Wildcats. He now has the most yards in Wildcats history. 90 catches, 1,400 yards. Huh?
More than Gronk.
Yes, more than Gronk, exactly, because he didn't deal with a back injury the entire time. But 90 catches, 1,400 yards, 10 touchdowns in 2023. Followed that up this year with 84 catches for 1,319 yards and 8 touchdowns. And again, the 6'5", 212-pound frame of McMillan's gives him that massive catch radius. And it's not just the size, it's his ability to track down the football as well. He also has sneaky good yak ability for somebody who is just a monster, or someone who looks like, hey, this is just a monster outside receiver. Like, no, he can also take the football and get yards after catch for his size. His ball tracking ability, I was looking at some of your film breakdowns of him, and his ability to track down the football, especially in the deep part of the field, is elite level, especially for college. And he has a sneaky good change of direction as well, which is impressive for a guy from his size. Now, there are some concerns. The route running can use some improvement. Now, it's better than I think people think, but it also just gives him more room to grow. And that's me spinning the concern into a positive, where it's not great, but he'll learn and he'll grow, and he can kind of turn into a dominant number 1 wide receiver. And we mentioned it when we were talking about Ibuka. He does kind of lack like top tier speed. Like, he's not a DK Metcalf out there where he's this massive frame and can also run like a 4.2 or whatever. We'll see what he ends up running next week, but I still think his ability to, create that yards after catch without being necessarily a burner makes him that much more of an elite prospect. So if he's there at 4 and they haven't addressed wide receiver at all, I'd be comfortable with them taking him. He's a prototypical wide receiver 1. They've lacked that in this system for quite some time. It would give Drake May not just a binky security blanket at tight end with like he has with Hunter Henry, but it gives him that type of guy at wide receiver as well. So, and he can also move around the formation. He's not just an outside guy. They can kind of put him inside, put him outside, something McDaniels likes. His ability to do that tells me he's a cerebral wide receiver as well. So if he's at 4, I would take Tet. Or I wouldn't be mad if they took him. I'm not necessarily all for Tet at 4, but it doesn't bother me if they do it. What do you say about Tet McMillan at pick number 4?
I like Tet. I wouldn't mind it at 4 because I just think he's very misunderstood. One, he seems like a really good guy. Like, one, he's a really hard worker. I think he had like a 4.2 GPA or something like that. He's a really, really smart kid, obsessed with football. So, like, he's going to be, I think, a great player. He's got the tools, and usually what makes you great is obviously health, but also work ethic, and I think he's got that in spades. My biggest concerns are I want to see more urgency and physicality in his route running.
Okay.
I feel like he runs routes like a guy who is smaller and faster than he is, where he can just kind of, saunter up to guys and then just explode. And also, I feel like he tries to get around guys more often than I'd like to see. Now, he does have speed, but it's more like he's more got strider speed, where he can eat chunks of yards. And if it's off coverage, which, to be fair, yes, you can see a lot of press coverage, but like defenses are only playing press like 30% of the time. So you can scheme opportunities for a guy like Tet if you were worried about press coverage. Like if you're going to face press, put him in the slot. If you're not going to face press, put him outside. Like you can get around those things. But press is really the only place where I'm really worried. Other than that, his yak ability is very similar to T. Higgins, where they catch the ball and immediately are transitioning upfield. They have this spin move where they usually take advantage of bad angles, make guys miss. And again, he just eats yards. So if you get him over the middle and there's space, he can get a whole lot after the catch, and then adds to that with, like you mentioned, the downfield ability where, no, he's not exactly a burner, but there's not a whole lot of guys that are going to be able to stop him from catching whatever the hell he wants if Drake May were to put a ball in his area coach. So, yeah, I'm a really big Tet fan. All of these guys, except for like Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter, obviously, and then Mason Graham as well, I'd rather get after a trade down. But if for some reason Mason Graham weren't there, or they weren't really huge fans of Mason Graham and said, hey, this is a Drake May, first 2 days, we want to get us some weapons and pick Tet, I'm not going to be mad.
Yeah, me either. It's once we got to the, the 1 and 2 here, it's guys who, I mean, barring a 29-inch arm length from Will Campbell, like you can understand why they would take these guys at the number 4 overall pick. But at the end of the day, we'll see what happens. It's February 18th, and we have a lot of time left in between. Now, I know we talked, Taylor, about kind of throwing some fringe guys in. Now, we're at the 1 hour 20 mark. I know we kind of got to get out of here, and so do I'm sure the people watching are like, all right, how long are these guys going to talk? But do you have any other guys? We won't get into it, strengths and weaknesses, but a couple names where you could also potentially see them drafting guys at the end of the first round.
There is one that I'm going to mention tomorrow in our round 2, because he wasn't on Daniel Jeremiah's list. And if he's not, I'm just going to assume that people are maybe saying he's more of a early second rounder. I will say Matthew Golden, the Texas wide receiver. I really like him. Now, I don't love the lack of size. He's got some drop concerns as well. So those are definitely significant. Daniel Jeremiah has him going 30th to the Bills, but had him going 21st to the Steelers before that. 21st is like, yeah, you're probably not trading back that high for anybody. But 30 is much more doable. I would love to see the Patriots jump the Bills this year after the Bills kind of screwed them when they tried to get up there for, it was Keon Coleman or X or whoever it was. So, yeah, I would really like Matthew Golden. Now, it's weird because his fit would be awkward. I think he'd probably more of a slot guy, motion guy, to be honest, because he's not big enough to be an X. He's like 6 foot, 195 pounds. You're not going to live outside at that size. And then as a Z, he doesn't block super well, so you don't really want him as part of your run schemes. So his projection's a little off. He's going to need to maybe get bigger and stronger to maybe give him a little bit more of an edge on the outside. Also, as a blocker, clearly going to need to improve there. But I love the vertical speed. He's got a little juice after the catch where if he catches a curl and you take a bad angle, he's going to be able to get some yards after it. But really, his salesmanship on routes, like he attacks leverage, gets into guys' blind spots to get them confused, And if you don't make contact with him, he's got good speed to punish you vertically, and then not only track the ball and make difficult adjustments, but also catch it if guys are being disruptive at the catch point. So that's a guy where if they did want to sneak back into that, end of that first round, I wouldn't love the idea for a wide receiver, but I think it would make some sense. He's a talented guy who would fit Drake May.
Love it. All right, one more guy I'll throw in the mix. I know we could get to him tomorrow. We'll see what happens when we make out our list. But it's Oregon's Josh Connerly, another left tackle potential there. Had an up and down Senior Bowl. I know you were out there and you kind of saw it better than I did. But he's a guy who could, again, if they don't take one at the top of the first, if they don't necessarily touch the position in free agency, a guy who could potentially come in and be that left tackle of the future. So ultimately, we'll see what happens. And that's why we're going to leave it at there, because tomorrow we'll be back with round 2, guys. Some other day 2 Patriots fits. We'll bring our top 5 once again. We'll skip the Abdul Carter, Travis Hunter nonsense, because there's no necessarily sure things in the second round as we get into it. But we're going to go through the top 100-ish players of this draft and see who can fit the Patriots for the remainder of the week. So until then, we'll keep you posted on Twitter. Keep it locked in on Patriots Press Pass. Rate, review, subscribe to the channel as always. And until tomorrow, thanks for watching. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. And we'll see you soon. Peace out, everyone.